The distress signal came in broken pieces, like a voice screaming through a storm. David pressed his headset closer and ran the signal through 3 different filters. Each time, the result was the same. Real. Verified. Desperate. He pushed away from his console and looked across the command deck of the Galani Union flagship, the Whisper of Dawn. Around him, officers from 6 different species worked in quiet routine. None of them had heard it yet. "Sir," David said, his voice cracking, "I have a priority signal from the Rathene corridor. It is a full-spectrum distress broadcast. Commander Paleth, a tall Rathene officer with gray skin and 4 arms, turned slowly. Source: civilian transport convoy. 47 ships. David swallowed. They say the Varaki are here. Thousands of warships. The corridor is falling." The room went cold. The Rathene corridor was the lifeline of the Galani Union. 3 major star systems depended on it for trade, travel, and communication. Losing it would cut the Union in half. Within the hour, more signals poured in. Orbital stations destroyed. Colony worlds burning. Refugee ships fleeing in every direction with nowhere to go. The Varaki Dominion had launched a full invasion, and they had brought everything. Chancellor Moran called the emergency summit that same day. She was old, even by Galani standards, with deep lines across her pale face and eyes that had seen too many wars. Representatives of all 42 member species appeared on screen from across the galaxy. The numbers were terrible. The Varaki had over 12,000 warships. The Union's combined fleet was barely 6,000, and most of those were scattered across dozens of sectors. It would take weeks to assemble them, and the Varaki were advancing now. "We must pool every ship," Moran said. "Every shuttle, every armed transport, every retired cruiser. Pull them all." The representatives agreed, but everyone in the room understood the truth. Even if they gathered every ship they had, it would not be enough. The Varaki were stronger, faster, and they had chosen their moment perfectly. One by one, the speakers fell silent. The summit felt less like a war council and more like a funeral. Then Moran said something no one expected. "Open Channel 0. The room erupted. Channel 0 was an ancient open frequency, a signal that reached far beyond Union space into the unknown. It was a relic from the earliest days of the Union, designed to contact species that had not yet been discovered. No one had used it in over 2,000 years. Broadcasting on it was considered an act of desperation, a confession to the entire galaxy that the Union could not protect itself. "Chancellor, that signal will reach the quarantine zones," one advisor warned. "Sector 7 Gray. We do not know what lives there." "I know exactly what it means," Moran replied, "and I know we are out of options." "Send it." The message was simple, a distress call in Galactic Common, repeating on loop. It described the invasion, the threat to civilian worlds, and a request for any assistance from any species willing to help. Most council members considered it a symbolic gesture at best. No one lived in the quarantine zones. The energy readings from Sector 7 Gray had kept every explorer away for decades. It was empty space, or so they believed. David monitored the signal as it went out. He tracked it as it crossed Union borders and sailed into the dark. Hours passed. The bridge crew changed shifts. Reports kept coming in from the corridor. Another station destroyed. Another convoy lost. David stayed at his post, watching the frequencies, waiting for nothing. Then, 14 hours after the broadcast, his console blinked at a return signal. Coming from deep inside Sector 7, Gray. David's hands shook as he cleaned up the transmission. The voice was rough, the accent strange, and the Galactic Common was imperfect, like someone who had learned the language by listening rather than speaking it. "This is the United Earth Starfleet. We received your broadcast on the open channel. We hear you. Hold your positions and protect your people. We are coming." David played it again, then a third time. The words did not change, that he ran a scan on the signal's origin point. The results made no sense. The transmission had come from a region that every Union chart listed as uninhabited. There were no known species there. No colonies. No stations. Just strange energy patterns that the Union had never been able to explain. Davin flagged the message and routed it directly to Chancellor Moran. Within minutes, she was on the command deck, listening to the recording with an expression he could not read. "What is United Earth?" she asked quietly. "I do not know, Chancellor. There is no record of any species by that name in our database." Moran stared at the star map, at the glowing dot deep inside the quarantine zone where the signal had originated. Something was out there. Something that had been listening to the Union for a very long time, hiding in a place no one dared to look. "They said they are coming," Moran whispered. Davin looked at his screen, at the tiny blinking light in the middle of all that empty dark, and felt something he had not felt in days. He was not sure if it was hope or fear. Maybe both. 80 years is not a long time for civilization, but it is enough to change everything. Captain Rena Osei stood in the briefing hall of the U.S. Longstrider and watched 4,000 officers fill the seats around her. Every face carried the same expression: tension, focus, the knowledge that what came next would define humanity forever. On the massive screen behind her, a star map glowed with red markers showing the Viraki advance across the Rathene corridor. Civilian deaths were already in the millions. Fleet Admiral Kwame Asani's voice filled the hall from the command carrier UES Motherland, broadcast to every ship in the fleet simultaneously. 80 years ago, we found a way to cross the stars. We reached out and discovered we were not alone. And what we found scared us. Every species we observed either exploited the weak or enslaved them. We made a decision then. We would hide. We would build. We would prepare for the day the galaxy came knocking at our door. He paused. The silence in the briefing hall was absolute. That day has not come. Something else has. A cry for help. Billions of innocent people are about to die, and the only fleet close enough and strong enough to stop it is ours. I will not order you to fight someone else's war, but I will tell you what I told the Joint Command this morning. If we sit here in the dark while civilizations burn, then we are no better than the empires we were hiding from. Rena felt the weight of those words settle over the room like a blanket. She had served in the fleet for 19 years. She had trained for conflicts that never came, run drills against imaginary enemies, and patrolled the borders of a territory that no one knew existed. Every human ship, every weapon, every piece of technology had been built in secret inside Sector 7 Gray, the region the galaxy called a quarantine zone. The strange energy readings that kept aliens away were not natural. They were human-made, a network of signal disruptors designed to make the entire sector look dangerous and uninhabitable. Behind that curtain, humanity had built something extraordinary. 42 colony worlds, shipyards the size of small moons. A fleet of 4,200 warships armed with technology no other species had ever developed. Kinetic rail cannons that fired tungsten slugs at a fraction of light speed. Adaptive hull plating that absorbed and redistributed energy across the entire ship. Combat AI systems that linked thousands of vessels into a single coordinated mind. Earth had learned from its own bloody history. Every war, every mistake, every genocide had been studied and turned into doctrine. Humanity did not build weapons to conquer. It built weapons to make sure no one could ever threaten it again. But now those weapons had a different purpose. After the Admiral's address, Rena returned to the Longstrider's bridge and gathered her senior crew. Her first officer, a quiet woman named Adiz, was already running pre-jump calculations. Weapons Officer Petros was loading the rail cannon magazines. Navigator Sewell had the jump coordinates locked. "How long to the Rathene corridor?" Rena asked. 7 hours in jump space, Sewell replied. "We will exit directly into the combat zone." Rena nodded. 7 hours. That was all the time they had to prepare for a battle that would reveal humanity's existence to every species in the galaxy. There would be no taking it back, no returning to the shadows. The moment those jump points opened, the quarantine zone story was over, and humanity would have to face whatever came next. She thought about Earth. About the asteroid that had nearly ended everything a century ago, the one that struck the Pacific and killed 300 million people in a single day. That disaster had done what centuries of politics could not. It unified the planet. Every nation, every government, Every faction looked at the crater where an ocean used to be and made the same decision. Never again. Humanity would never again be caught unprepared. The fleet began its jump sequence at exactly 1,400 hours Earth Standard Time. 4,200 ships moved into formation with a precision that would have terrified any observer. Destroyers on the flanks, cruisers in the center, the dreadnoughts, including the Long Strider, forming the armored fist at the front. And behind them all, the massive carriers and hospital ships, ready to deploy fighters and save lives in equal measure. Rena watched through the bridge viewport as the stars stretched and folded. Jump space was always strange, a tunnel of light and silence where time felt slower and the universe seemed to hold its breath. "All hands," she said over the ship-wide channel. "This is the captain. In 7 hours, we will drop out of jump space into an active war zone. Most of you have trained your entire careers for a moment like this. I will not waste your time with a long speech. You know who we are, you know what we can do, and you know why we are going." She paused and looked at her crew, at the faces of people who had grown up hearing stories about a galaxy that did not know they existed. Today, they find out. The Long Strider jumped, and 4,200 ships followed, vanishing from the cradle in a wave of light that left nothing behind but empty space and silence. 11 billion people lived on the Paulori homeworld, and not one of them had ever held a weapon. The Paulori were healers, artists, poets. They had joined the Galani Union 3,000 years ago and contributed more to medicine and culture than any other species in recorded history. They had no military, no warships, no orbital defense platforms. They had always believed that the Union would protect them, and for 3,000 years, that belief had been enough that IT was not enough today. Davin watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Whisper of Dawn as the Varaki Armada closed in on Paulori Prime. 12,000 red dots moving in a slow, terrible wave toward a world that had no way to fight back. The Union's hastily assembled defense fleet, 3,800 ships pulled from every corner of their territory, formed a thin line between the Varaki and the planet. It looked like a wall of paper standing against a flood. Chancellor Moran was aboard. She had refused to leave. When her advisors begged her to evacuate to a safer system, she had looked at them with those tired old eyes and said, "If Paulori Prime falls, there is no safer system." The Varaki came to a stop at the edge of weapons range. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Overlord Drass's face appeared on every screen in the system. He was massive, even by Varaki standards, with thick armored plates across his face and a voice like grinding stone. "People of the Union," he said, "your corridor has fallen. Your trade routes are mine. Your outer colonies have surrendered. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and alone. I offer you a choice. Surrender now, and your people will serve the Dominion. Refuse, and I will burn this world until the oceans boil." He called it mercy. Davin called it death sentence with extra steps. Moran opened a channel to the defense fleet. Her voice was steady, though Davin could see her hands trembling. "All ships, hold formation. We fight for every second. We fight for every life. If this is where we fall, then let history remember that we did not run." The fleet tightened its formation. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. 3,800 ships prepared to die for a world that had never needed saving before. Then every sensor on the Whisper of Dawn screamed. Davin grabbed his console as the readings went wild. Energy signatures were appearing across the entire battlefield. Not from the Varaki side, not from behind the Union fleet, but from everywhere at once. Space itself seemed to twist and crack. Points of white light bloomed across the darkness like stars being born, hundreds of them, then thousands. "What is happening?" Paleth shouted. Davin stared at his screen. "Jump points. Thousands of them. They are opening all around us." From every point of light, a ship emerged, black-hulled with silver markings, moving in formations so tight and precise they looked like a single living thing. They kept coming, wave after wave, filling the space between the two fleets like a wall of dark metal appearing from nothing. 4,200 ships. The entire battlefield went silent. The Voraki stopped advancing. The Union fleet stopped preparing to die. Every channel, every frequency, every communication line fell quiet. For 11 seconds, not a single weapon fired. Not a single ship moved. The galaxy held its breath. Then a voice broke the silence. It was calm, deep, and carried an accent that no species in the Union had ever heard before. This is Fleet Admiral Kwame Asani of the United Earth Starfleet. We are humanity. We come from the world you sealed behind the quarantine zone. To the defenders of Palori Prime, we stand with you. To the Voraki Dominion, you have 60 seconds to begin a full withdrawal from this system. After 60 seconds, we will remove you by force. The channel stayed open. Every ship in the system heard it. On the bridge of the Whisper of Dawn, Davin forgot to breathe. Around him, officers from half a dozen species stared at their screens with wide eyes and open mouths. The ships were unlike anything in the Union database. Their hulls were thick and angular. Their weapon systems did not match any known configuration. Their energy signatures were enormous. Chancellor Moran stepped forward and stared at the tactical display. 4,200 new contacts, positioned in perfect attack formation between the Union fleet and the Voraki Armada. Humans, she whispered, from Sector 7 Gray. On the other side of the battlefield, Overlord Drassa studied the new arrivals. His officers were sending him panicked reports about unknown weapon types and hull compositions that did not appear in any Voraki database. His tactical AI could not predict their attack patterns because it had never seen anything like them. Drassa leaned forward in his command chair. He had conquered 36 worlds. He had broken the spine of the Rathene Defense Force in a single afternoon. He was not about to be frightened by a fleet of unknowns making threats on an open channel. All ships, Drassa ordered. Target the newcomers. Fire everything. The 60 seconds were not even half over. The first Voraki volley lit up the dark like a dying sun. 12,000 ships fired at once. Plasma bolts, fusion lances, and particle beams crossed the gap between the fleets in a blinding wall of light. Every weapon the Voraki had was designed to melt shields and crack hulls. Against Union ships, that kind of firepower would have ended the battle in seconds. The human ships did not melt. They did not crack. They did not even slow down. Davin watched from the bridge of the Whisper of Dawn as the plasma struck the black hulls and simply spread across them like water on hot metal. The adaptive plating absorbed the energy and redistributed it across the entire vessel. Shots that should have punched through a cruiser left nothing but fading heat signatures. The human fleet sailed through the firestorm as if it were rain. Then they fired back. The sound that came through the sensor arrays was something Davin would never forget. A deep, rhythmic hammering, like the heartbeat of something enormous and angry. Kinetic rail cannons. Every human warship carried them. They did not fire beams or bolts or plasma. They fired solid tungsten slugs, each one the size of a ground transport, accelerated to a fraction of light speed. The Voraki shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They had never encountered raw kinetic force on this scale. The first slugs hit the forward line of the Voraki fleet and went through their shields like they were not there. Ships did not explode. They shattered. Hulls crumpled inward. Engines detonated. In the first 3 minutes of the battle, 800 Voraki warships were destroyed or crippled. Captain Rena Osei felt the Long Strider shudder as its rail cannons fired in sequence. Each shot sent a vibration through the entire ship, a physical reminder that these weapons were not elegant. They were brutal. Humanity had studied the galaxy's technology from the shadows for decades and found a simple truth. Everyone used energy weapons. Everyone built shields to stop energy weapons. So humanity built something else entirely. Strike group, follow my lead, Rena ordered. We are going through the center. The Long Strider and its escort of 12 destroyers accelerated straight into the heart of the Voraki formation. The combat AI, linked across all 13 ships, predicted enemy movements 2 seconds before they happened. The destroyers wove through incoming fire with impossible precision while the Long Strider's cannons tore a path through the enemy line. Behind them, the gap widened as more human ships poured through, splitting the Voraki fleet in two on the Union side, Commander Paleth watched with all four hands gripping his console. "They fight as one creature," he whispered. "Thousands of ships, moving like a single mind." He was not wrong. The human combat AI did not just coordinate. It thought. It learned in real time, identifying Viraki formation patterns and exploiting them within seconds. Kill boxes formed and dissolved in moments, trapping clusters of enemy ships in overlapping fields of fire. The Viraki had never faced anything like it. Their command structure, built on rigid hierarchy and pre-planned tactics, could not adapt fast enough. Davin opened a communication channel to the human fleet. Union Vessel Whisper of Dawn to Human Command. "We are transmitting tactical data on Viraki shield harmonics and reactor placements. It may help." A human voice came back, quick and warm. "Received with thanks. Forwarding to all ships now." "Nice to meet you, by the way." Davin almost laughed. They were in the middle of the largest battle the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years, and this human was introducing himself. The Union data made an immediate difference. Human gunners began targeting specific weak points on Viraki ships, hitting reactor housings and shield generators with surgical accuracy. The kill rate doubled, then tripled. Overlord Drasso watched his fleet dying and felt something he had not experienced in 40 years of conquest. Fear. His tactical officers were shouting numbers at him. 4,000 ships lost. 5,000. 6,000. The human fleet had taken damage, but nothing critical. Their hulls healed themselves, redistributing armor to damaged sections while the ship kept fighting. "All ships, full retreat," Drasso ordered. "Fall back to the corridor." But when his fleet turned to run, they found the way blocked. Human fast attack frigates had jumped behind the Viraki lines during the chaos. 200 small, fast ships now sat directly in the retreat path, their weapons hot and their formations tight. Admiral Asani's voice returned on the open channel. "Overlord Drassa, your escape routes are closed. Your fleet is surrounded. You can continue fighting and lose everything, or you can power down your weapons and surrender. You have 30 seconds. I suggest you choose quickly." Drassa's bridge was chaos. Half his captains were already surrendering on their own, dropping shields and cutting engines. His own officers were looking at him with something he had never seen in their eyes before. Doubt. The Overlord slammed his fist into his command chair, cracking the armrest. "This is not over," he growled, but it was, and every soul in the system knew it. The wreckage stretched across 3 million kilometers of space, and somewhere in the middle of it, a Viraki soldier was dying. His ship had been torn apart by a kinetic slug that ripped through the engine room and split the hull in two. He was floating in what remained of the crew compartment, his armor cracked, his breathing shallow, and his blood freezing in the cold of open space. He had maybe 4 minutes of oxygen left. He closed his eyes and waited for the end. Then a light cut through the darkness. A shuttle, small and fast, painted white with a red cross on its side. It matched speed with the wreckage, and a hatch opened. 2 humans in sealed suits climbed out, crossed the gap with magnetic boots, and reached him in under a minute. They sealed his wounds with a medical foam he had never seen before, strapped him to a rescue frame, and pulled him into the shuttle where a third human was already warming an emergency bed. The Viraki soldier stared up at the face of the woman treating him. She was smaller than him by half. Her hands were steady and her eyes were focused. She spoke to him in rough galactic common. "You are safe. We're going to fix you. Try not to move." He was the enemy. His fleet had come to enslave billions, and these creatures were saving his life. This scene played out hundreds of times across the battlefield. The fighting was over. Of the 12,000 Viraki warships that had entered the system, fewer than 2,000 escaped. The rest were destroyed, disabled, or surrendered. Human losses stood at 310 ships destroyed and 400 damaged. The Union had lost 900 ships in the early fighting before the humans arrived. But what shocked the galaxy was not how humans fought. It was what they did after. Massive hospital ships jumped into the system within hours of the battle's end. They were enormous, larger than anything in the Union fleet, painted white and unarmed. They deployed medical shuttles by the hundreds, fanning out across the debris field. And they treated everyone. Union wounded, Palori civilians from damaged orbital stations, and Voraki prisoners pulled from broken ships. There was no sorting by species, no priority given to allies over enemies. A burned Voraki gunner received the same care as a wounded human pilot. The Union species did not understand this. The Galani had a tradition of executing enemy wounded. The Rathene left prisoners to die in a vacuum. The Palori, gentle as they were, had never imagined rescuing the soldiers who came to destroy their world. But the humans moved through the wreckage with a calm determination that left everyone silent. Chancellor Moran visited the human flagship 3 days after the battle. She was escorted to Admiral Asani's quarters aboard the UES Motherland, a room that surprised her with its simplicity. A desk, a few chairs, a framed photograph of a coastline she did not recognize. Asani stood to greet her. He was tall and broad, with gray at his temples and a face that looked like it had not slept in days. He offered her a chair and a cup of something hot and dark that he called coffee. She declined the drink, but accepted the seat. "I must ask you something," Moran said. "Your fleet destroyed 10,000 warships in a single engagement. Your weapons are beyond anything we have ever seen. Your technology is generations ahead of ours. And yet your first act after the battle was to rescue enemy soldiers. Why?" Asani was quiet for a moment. Then he reached for a small data tablet on his desk and handed it to her. On it was a list. Names, dates, places. Thousands of entries. "These are the wars we fought against each other before we reached the stars," he said. "We killed hundreds of millions of our own kind. We burned cities. We built weapons that could destroy our entire world. We came closer to wiping ourselves out than any species you have ever encountered." Moran read the list. The numbers were staggering. "We learned something from all of that death," Asani continued. "We learned that winning a war means nothing if you lose what makes you worth saving. We can fight harder than any species in this galaxy. Our bones are denser. Our muscles are stronger. We come from a world of earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, and predators. Your scientists would classify Earth as a class 12 death world. Everything about us is built for survival." He leaned forward. "But survival is not enough. We save the wounded because that is the line between a soldier and a monster. We crossed that line too many times on Earth. We will not cross it again." Moran set the tablet down. She looked at this human, this creature from a world of storms and death, and saw something she had not expected. Not a warrior, not a conqueror, a man carrying the weight of a species' worst mistakes and choosing, every single day, to be better. "Admiral," she said, "on behalf of the Galani Union and its 42-member species, I formally invite humanity to join us. Not as a protectorate, not as a client state, as full and equal partners." Asani smiled, but it was tired. "I appreciate that, Chancellor. But that decision is not mine alone. I need to speak with Earth." Moran nodded. She understood that as she left the flagship, she passed a medical bay where a human nurse was teaching a young Palori doctor how to use a bone-knitting device. In the next room, a Voraki prisoner was eating a meal that a human cook had prepared, adjusted to his species' dietary needs. These people had come from the dark, she thought, and they brought light with them. 6 months later, the galaxy was a different place, and Davin was learning to eat with chopsticks. He was sitting in the mess hall of the UES Longstrider, surrounded by human crew members who were watching his four-fingered hand struggle with 2 thin sticks of wood. Every time he dropped a piece of food, the table erupted in laughter. Not cruel laughter, the kind that invited him to try again. "Use the bottom one as an anchor," Captain Renas said, demonstrating for the 4th time. "The top one does the work. Your eating tools are designed for creatures with 5 fingers," Davin replied. "I have 4. This is a design flaw in your species." The table laughed again, and Rena grinned. "Fair point. Someone get this man a fork." Davin had been assigned as the Galani Union's first official liaison officer to the human fleet. It was supposed to be a diplomatic post, formal and distant. Instead, he had become part of the Longstrider's crew in every way that mattered. He ate with them, trained with them, and learned their strange habits. Humans sang when they worked. They argued loudly about things that did not matter, like which of their ancient ball games was superior. They slept in short, intense bursts and then stayed awake for impossibly long stretches. And they touched each other constantly, pats on the back, handshakes, arms around shoulders, as if physical contact was a language all its own that he had also learned the things they did not talk about. The quiet moments when a soldier would stare at nothing, lost in memories of the battle. The memorial wall on Deck 7, where 310 ship names were engraved, one for every vessel lost at Palori Prime. The way Rena's voice would go flat and steady when she talked about the crew members who did not come home. They were not invincible. They were simply willing to pay the cost. Across the galaxy, the aftershocks of the battle were still being felt. The Varaki Dominion had collapsed from within. Overlord Drassa was overthrown by his own generals less than a month after the defeat. The new Varaki leadership, desperate and afraid, had sent envoys to the Union requesting peace talks. For the first time in galactic history, a ceasefire was being negotiated rather than forced. The humans insisted on being part of those talks. Admiral Asani sat across the table from Varaki delegates and laid out terms that stunned both sides. No territorial conquest. No reparations designed to cripple the Dominion. No occupation. Instead, the humans proposed monitor disarmament, war crime tribunals for specific commanders, and economic aid to Varaki worlds that had been drained by the war machine. When the Union delegates questioned this approach, Asante said something that became famous across 43 star systems. A beaten enemy rebuilds in anger. A respected former enemy rebuilds in peace. We had tried it both ways. Trust us on this. Earth formally accepted membership in the Galwani Union after a global vote that passed with 91% approval. But humanity's terms were clear and non-negotiable. They would be partners, not subjects. They would share technology and medical knowledge freely. They would contribute to joint defense and disaster response. But they would keep full control of their fleet, their colonies, and their homeworld. The Union, having seen what that fleet could do, agreed without a single objection. The ceremony was held on the surface of Palori Prime, beneath an open sky filled with stars. Representatives of all 43 species gathered in the great garden of the capital city, a place the Palori had tended for over 1,000 years. It was the same city the Varaki had almost turned to ash. Chancellor Moran stood before the assembly and spoke in a voice that carried across the garden and across the galaxy through a live broadcast. 9,000 years ago, the first species of our union looked up at the stars and decided to reach for them together. We built something beautiful, a coalition of minds, cultures, and dreams, bound by the belief that cooperation was stronger than conquest. But we forgot something important. We forgot that peace is not a gift. It is a choice, and it must be defended. She paused and looked toward the human delegation. Admiral Asani stood at the front, flanked by Captain Rena and dozens of officers in their dark uniforms. 6 months ago, a fleet of black ships jumped into our darkest hour and stood between our people and destruction. They came from a world of fire, storms, and predators. A world so dangerous that we sealed it behind a quarantine zone and forgot about it. And yet, when we cried out for help into the void, they were the ones who answered. Not because they owed us anything, but because they knew what it meant to suffer, and they refused to let it happen to others. The garden was silent. 11 billion Palori watched from their homes. Trillions more across the Union listened. Today, we welcome humanity into our Union. Not as saviors, not as weapons, as family. The applause began slowly and then grew until it filled the garden and spilled out into the streets of the city. Later that night, Davin stood alone on an observation deck above the garden. The Joint Patrol fleet passed overhead, human and Union ships flying side by side, their lights tracing lines across the dark sky. He thought about the day he had first heard that strange voice on Channel Zero. The rough accent, the imperfect grammar, the simple, impossible words. We heard you. We are coming. He realized now that the galaxy had not held its breath that day out of fear. IT had held its breath out of hope. And for the first time in a very long time, that hope was answered.